So last night at a massive rally in Phoenix, President Trump unloaded on the liberal mainstream media, the establishment media, and for good reason. He called out their lies, their propaganda, their agenda, and the fact that they are now just an arm of the radical leftist movement that is in this country. Watch the president from last night.
It's time to expose the crooked media deceptions and to challenge the media for their role in fomenting divisions. These are sick people. You know the thing I don't understand? You would think they'd want to make our country great again, and I honestly believe they don't. If you want to discover the source of the division in our country, look no further than the fake news and the crooked media.
You know, the president's right. You would think they want to make America great again. You know what? Do they ever talk about solutions to solve the problems this country is facing? We'll get to that later. Now, predictably, after President Trump fought back in a big way, well, it sent the lazy, overpaid, radical, ideologically driven media into a frenzy. For example, here is how fake news CNN reacted. Take a look at this.
What we have witnessed was a total eclipse of the facts. Someone who came out on stage and lied directly to the American people. He's unhinged. It's embarrassing. His speech was without thought. It was without reason. It was devoid of facts. It was devoid of wisdom. There was no gravitas. There was no sanity there. But he has given oxygen to racists. He is clearly trying to ignite a civil war in this country.
It was an astounding chain of lies tied together by lunatic asides by a man who obviously is mentally unstable.
That is not sane behavior. I am not a psychiatrist. I am just a regular human being who knows a lot of people and who knows the difference between right and wrong, which is more than this 71-year-old man baby seems to be able to know. That the only defensible excuse, the only defensible explanation is if he is not mentally well.
Actually, CNN is unhinged and embarrassing. Really, Don? Civil war? Now, the president, he's right. The media is stirring up severe tensions in this country, and this is exactly why crowds at the Trump rally, like we saw last night, hey, Don, hey, Jeff Zucker, they were chanting at you. Take a listen. Yeah, CNN sucks. You know what? Have you guys ever thought that maybe those people, maybe they're sending you a message? Hey, Jeff Zucker, CNN, you're the head of CNN. Are you proud of the lies, the garbage that is being spewed on your network day in and day out, hour in, hour out? Because guess what, Jeff? You own this rhetoric. You own the lies that your network tells. Now, up next is the deranged conspiracy theory spreading fake news leftists, ideologues over at MSNBC. Take a look.
It is a unique situation to have a president go out to the American public like this on live television and lie this way.
Members publicly, privately are acknowledging that this guy is a basket case, that he cannot serve, he cannot lead the party.
He, in fact, in his heart does stand with white supremacists.
It's a rhetorical disaster, not only for this country and also the political discourse, but also, even though he just will never understand it, his long-term political health.
It is deeply disturbing and offensive the way he spoke of the media, but what Donald Trump's speech is not deeply disturbing and offensive.
Sadly predictable and unbelievable. Hey, Andy Lack, you're the head of NBC. You now own every one of these conspiracy theories, all the lies that are told on your network. Up next, we have the big three broadcast networks. Let's take a look at how they handled this.
Mr. Trump was unrestrained, lashing out in a tirade that started with a call for unity.
I've covered a lot of President Trump's rallies, and I don't think I've ever seen him this angry.
What does it mean that the president is essentially committing fratricide, screaming obscenities at the Senate Majority Leader, and then bashing two Republican senators in their own home state?
Well, George, this was incitement, plain and simple. The president said that journalists hate this country. That's what he told this crowd. This was an assault that went on and on and on. And, George, I've got to tell you, this one felt different. It really feels like a matter of time, frankly, before someone gets hurt.
It is just shocking that this is happening with an occupant in the White House.
Now, try and put yourself in the position of the president. If you were unfairly lied about, if you were called a racist, one of the worst things you can say about somebody, you know you're not. You have a history of not being racist. You've spoken out against racism your whole life. Wouldn't you feel a need to defend yourself, your honor, your reputation, your character, your family? Well, the Destroy Trump media, they're beyond pathetic, and they deserve now every bit of criticism that they're getting from the president and rational thinking Americans. And finally, there's President Obama's former director of national intelligence, James Clapper. He's now pushing a new tinfoil hat, black helicopter conspiracy theory about President Trump's fitness for office. Now, listen to this nonsense, and then we'll remind you about him because he's a known liar. Take a listen.
I don't know when I've listened and watched something like this from a president that I found more disturbing. I really question his ability to, his fitness to be in this office, having some understanding of the levers that a president can exercise. I worry about, frankly, the access to nuclear codes.
Really? Now, let me see if I remember correctly. Isn't that the same James Clapper who lied about surveillance to Congress, who originally said he saw zero evidence of so-called Trump-Russia collusion? Well, he's since changed his tune. Well, I don't know. I guess that's what you have to do if you want to get a job over at the fake news network, the Clinton News Network these days. Let's see. A liar on CNN. Sounds like a perfect match in heaven to me. But here's the bigger point. To the leftist media, everything is President Trump's fault. You know what? He can't say or do anything in their eyes that is right. Here's what I came to the conclusion after last night. If President Trump could actually cure cancer, make people in wheelchairs walk, give every American $1 million, if he could prevent heart attacks or stop car accidents, well, guess what? The media still wouldn't be happy. They still wouldn't be satisfied. And by the way, if the dog bites, the bee stings, and you're feeling sad, it's Donald Trump's fault in their eyes. Now, somehow the media thinks that President Trump, that he wasn't supposed to respond to them calling a racist and a bigot every hour of every day. So here's a little reminder of just some of the things the media has said about the president in just the past 2 weeks before last night's rally, which caused the president to respond.
Why is President Trump showing sympathy for white nationalists and other hate groups? One editorial board of a big paper this morning calling the president America's bigot-in-chief.
He's now given safe harbor to Nazis, to white supremacists. He's so disgraced, not just the Republican Party, but the country.
Donald Trump, short of only maybe Woodrow Wilson and Andrew Jackson, is being himself more than any other previous president with disgraceful racial views. That's the truth. He's not pandering to people. These are his views.
I think people now realize that this strain of white nationalism in the White House is, in fact, something that is more closely associated with the president himself.
Barack Obama was a black president. Maybe he didn't think that Barack Obama was fit to be in office. He traded on racial animus and racial BS, and he's been doing it for decades. Anyone who is in that White House and who is supporting him is complicit in their racism as well.
It was disturbing, Don. I think we saw the president's true colors today, and I'm not sure they were red, white, and blue.
We can surely say his words have absolutely emboldened white supremacists.
You know, it's a tough night. I think for normal people, you got a lot of people at home going through Kleenex right now. I'm just hurt. I'm sitting here hurt. And I think a lot of people are hurt tonight.
So as the president pointed out last night, when it comes to Charlottesville, at condemning hatred and racism and bigotry, well, the Destroy Trump media, they have distorted and misrepresented everything that he has said. They've also neglected to mention the many numerous times he has condemned outright the likes of David Duke, the KKK, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists. So because the media refuses to report the facts and do their job, let's go through them one by one and show every example of the president doing this, highlighting all the examples. Now, we're going to make it so simple and easy for members of the abusively biased press to follow along. We're going to do this. Listen, hear that? Okay, we'll start with the tragedy in Charlottesville. Now, on Saturday, August the 12th, the day it happened, before a madman plowed his car into a group of people, the president tweeted out the following: "We all must be united and condemn all that hate stands for. There's no place for this kind of violence in America. Let's come together as one. Now, then the president went on to say, we must remember this truth. No matter our color, creed, religion, or political party, we're all Americans first. And after the protest turned deadly, President Trump immediately came out. He condemned the hatred. Take a look yourself.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides.
Now, the media went ballistic because President Trump, he dared to tell the truth, and the video proves it. The white supremacists, we all know this, they deserve the blame for starting the violence. And by the way, the revulsion most people feel when they see people like that is natural and normal. And these people should be condemned in the strongest possible terms, which President Trump did. But of course, that was not good enough for the Destroy Trump media. So that Monday, President Trump, he came out again and condemned all of these hate groups. And yes, he did it by name. Watch this.
Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans.
And the very next day, President Trump, he denounced again these hate groups. Take a look for yourself.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. It has no place in America. I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups.
Now, for the leftist press, President Trump's remarks still, they weren't enough. They weren't said well enough. Instead of acknowledging and accepting the numerous times that the president rightly spoke out against these despicable, disgusting white supremacists, well, the media, they tried to use this for political purposes and bludgeon the president and all conservatives and all Republicans, just like they do every 2 and 4 years, as I have proved again and again right here on this show. They also completely ignored the president's decades-long history of denouncing bigots, racists like David Duke. And it goes all the way back to 1991. Donald Trump, he was on CNN's Larry King Live. All CNN had to do was dig up the tape and show it to you and be fair and balanced and do their jobs and be diligent in their work. But, of course, they won't do that. There's also countless video examples of President Trump rebuking David Duke and these hate groups. So-called journalists, maybe you can learn something. Pay close attention. Words matter.
What are your views on the Ku Klux Klan and white supremacists?
I totally disavow the Ku Klux Klan. I totally disavow David Duke. I've been doing it now for 2 weeks. You're probably about the 18th person that's asked me the question. I didn't even know he endorsed me. David Duke endorsed me? Okay. All right. I disavow.
David Duke announced his Senate candidacy, claiming your agenda for his own, or essentially saying, glad that you spoke out.
Are you ready before you ask the question?
Newt Gingrich said every Republican should repudiate this guy no matter what it takes.
And I do. Rebuked. Is that okay? Rebuked.
Rebuked.
Done.
I disavowed him every time I speak to somebody virtually, and, they just keep it going. They keep it going.
How would you characterize in more words than one David Duke?
David Duke is a bad person who I disavowed on numerous occasions over the years. I disavowed him. I disavowed the KKK. I just did the Today Show, and it was the same thing. And I said, how many times do I have to disavow? Do you want me to do it again for the 12th time?
Well, I wanted it on the record on this.
How many times do I have to reject? I've rejected David Duke, I've rejected the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. From the time I'm 5 years old, I rejected them.
What do you see as the biggest problem with the Reform Party right now?
Well, you've got David Duke just joined, a bigot, a racist, a problem. I mean, this is not exactly the people you want in your party.
That was back to 1991, the year 2000. Ask yourself this question tonight. Why does the media refuse to show you all the examples of the president repudiating vile, divisive people, white supremacists, and other racist groups? The answer is simple. They are agenda-driven. They are radical left-wing ideologues. They are hell-bent on destroying this presidency of Donald Trump. Now, we saw it way back during the campaign. Remember, just about every major media news outlet, except the Fox News channel, was caught red-handed. What were they doing? Colluding with the Clinton campaign. And we've also seen it with the media. They're nonstop, tinfoil hat, black helicopter conspiracy theories, consistently negative coverage of this president. He can do nothing right in their eyes. You may remember this Harvard study. It shows over 90% of the Clinton News Network, fake news, NBC, CBS, their coverage of the president was negative. The media cannot handle the fact that they are now being exposed, as they were last night, as agenda-driven and fake news. They think they can lie. They think they can call conservatives, Republicans, and the president racist, bigots, homophobes, Islamophobes, sexist, xenophobic, Islamophobic. They think they can push conspiracy theories about Russian collusion for months on end with no concrete evidence and not be called out and not be exposed. Well, tonight the media's credibility is now gone. They are nothing but propaganda outlets for leftist ideology. They are all basically a bunch of sheep who echo each other. They got their own little echo chamber. They feign moral outrage every chance they can get. They create fake crisis after fake crisis using fake news. And, of course, sources that are not identified, anonymous sources. It's gone from Russia to President Trump going to launch a nuclear war with North Korea to, oh, my gosh, racist. Now they've all been exposed. And here's the saddest part of all of this. They do not care about the forgotten men and women in this country who are desperately needing solutions, that voted for this president. This is a duly elected president that they want to push out of office. They are not trying to help solve this country's problems, to help the millions of Americans suffering. They don't tell the truth about what's really going on in America. Now, besides this show, how often do you hear about 50 million Americans in poverty? 50 million Americans on food stamps. By the way, 13 million more Americans on food stamps after Obama, 8 million more in poverty after Obama, 95 million Americans out of the labor force. Did they mention 1 million new jobs since Donald Trump's been elected president? They had the lowest labor participation rate since the 1970s. Now we have the best labor participation rate in years. We had the worst economic recovery since the 40s, the lowest home ownership rate in 51 years. That's all after Obama. The media never told you the truth about that. They don't give a rip, obviously. The president was right. Do they want to make America great again? Did they ever talk about solutions, helping the American people, answers to our problems? Do they ever care about the people that voted for the president, that want to drain the swamp and sewer that is not only D.C., but it's also the media? Do they want real change that will impact people's lives in a positive way? So as the president said last night, they obviously don't care about making America great again. They never talk about solutions. Instead, they tear down, they delegitimize, and they want to destroy the president you voted for. Why? They don't want to help the American people after decades and decades of neglect from out-of-touch, power-hungry politicians in Washington? That's who they are? Well, they're getting worse every day, and I don't think it's going to get better. But here's what we will do. We will continue to expose them and their agenda every night right here on this program. And we do thank you for being with us.
President Trump spoke last night in Phoenix, and in what has become a routine display, thousands of left-wing protesters showed up. Some of them decided to riot. Watch this. Ouch, that now famous piece of tape. Well, demonstrators threw bottles, rocks, and tear gas canisters at the police and wreaked some havoc on the streets of Phoenix. It's pretty violent behavior, yet both Reuters and the Washington Post described that group as, quote, peace activists. Evidently, war is now peace. That's not too surprising, since the Post already believes that ignorance is strength and freedom is slavery. You'll recognize those as Orwellian slogans that are now somehow real in America. Left-wing protesters in Arizona made it clear they despise Donald Trump, but they still like him more than many members of the press do. They flailed about in their attempts to one-up one another's rhetoric last night. Watch this.
And I think it's one of the more morally shocking things that Trump has done, which is saying something, is he's basically going there in the hopes of starting a riot.
The only defensible explanation is if he is not mentally well. Because if he is, then he is just such an incredible, self-centered, narcissistic, unfit jerk.
He has given oxygen to racists. He hasn't really said anything, denounced the alt-right. He talked about the KKK and whatever. He hasn't really done that. He is clearly trying to ignite a civil war in this country. He has not tamped down race.
I kind of like Don Lemon. How could you not? But igniting civil war? Step back from the ledge, Don. You're getting close. Newt Gingrich is an author, thinker, Trump advisor, former Speaker of the House, of course, and he joins us in the studio tonight. Mr. Speaker, igniting a civil war, I mean, how seriously should we take rhetoric like that?
I think maybe you and I disagree. I think very seriously.
Okay.
I think Prager did a piece about 3 months ago on America's second civil war, arguing that what you're seeing with Antifa, what you're seeing on college campuses, what you're seeing to some extent in the bureaucracy is a real division of the country. You just had the former director of national intelligence explain that he thinks Trump may not be mentally stable enough to be president.
This is the one who lied to Congress about spying on Americans?
Sadly, I knew Clapper back when he was a normal military guy before he went off the deep end. But, I mean, he clearly spun out in a way. But you've had these kind of things going on. And so I think the gap is getting wider. I think that the chaos, what happened to the left is at 8 o'clock in the evening, Hillary was going to break the glass ceiling, and at 11 o'clock in the evening, Donald J. Trump was going to be president. And the hard left has never recovered. It's a great trauma that they have never recovered from. And they're now seeing their world starting to be taken apart. I mean, instead of a left-wing judge, they get a right-wing judge. You know, instead of more regulations, they're getting less regulations. Instead of America being defeated and weak, America suddenly is getting stronger and beginning to win. I mean, it's horrifying if you're a real left-winger.
So I spent a lot of time on the show pointing out the hysteria and the absurdity of some of the claims on the left, and we'll continue to do that because it's unbelievable. On the other hand, just as an American, I don't want a civil war. I don't want this to happen. I don't want the country to be this divided. What's the solution to this?
Well, look, I think a very good friend of mine teaches Civil War history at Gettysburg College, and he has made the case that the parallels between Trump's inaugural and Lincoln's inaugural and the reactions to them are amazing. That if you go and you look at how South Carolina slave newspapers responded to Lincoln, and then you look at how the left responded to Trump, they're almost verbatim parallels. And, you know, I wish we could all sing Kumbaya and come together, but I don't think that's going to happen. And I think what's going to happen is the left is going to get crazier and crazier. You just did this piece I told you a while ago. I have to get this in. That I think we really ought to talk about ESPN is the extremely stupid political network.
Yeah.
Because what they do, no matter how Trump goes off the reservation, they find a way to be dumber. I mean, every time you get ready to think, well, you know, the president really shouldn't do X, they come along and do something crazy on the left.
It's almost like they're working for him. But how do you, I mean, is it inexorable, this move toward permanent division? What do you do about it? Because, I mean, if it ever, you know, societies that turn against themselves, you know, it's bad.
Well, look, as a historian, my view is pretty straightforward. One side or the other wins. It's not like you come together with some grand compromise. One side or the other wins. Now, what's happening and what's driving the left crazy is the 8 years of Obama were a disaster at every level below the presidency. They lost state legislative seats, they lost governorships, they lost the House and Senate. And so the country, in response to seeing the left, began moving away from the left. And that process, I think, is continuing. And I think that that's part of why you see a Democratic Party that can't recover even when the president gives them opportunities. I think also they're faced with reality. For example, they're now having their new battle cry, which is Medicare for all. Sounds terrific if you say so. How would you like your taxes to go up 300%? And even Vermont has concluded they can't afford it.
Of course.
Now, if California thought they could, now California thinks they can't afford it. Yet you see Democrats nationally signing up for a program they can't possibly defend.
Are there any responsible Democrats at the national level?
Hard to know.
Because however disorganized the Trump people are, and it's very frustrating as someone who agrees with them on a lot to see how disorganized they are, you look at the alternative and you think those people shouldn't be near power at all. They're scary.
Well, and here's the problem. There are a lot of individual Democrats who I respect, and if I'm talking to them over lunch or if I have a cup of coffee with them, one-on-one they're terrific. Then they go back in the Democratic caucus, and they're not allowed to be normal.
Yeah, no room for moderation.
They suddenly go, well, I guess I really have to be this person. And you saw this with Tim Kaine, when he got to be the vice presidential nominee. Whatever he used to believe, he didn't quite believe, because now he had to believe what you have to believe to be the Democratic vice president.
He became a hater, and it was sad to watch.
And he's a much better guy.
No, I know he is. I know he is. It was depressing. Mr. Speaker, thanks for joining us.
Good with you.
You didn't make me feel better.
Sorry.
I appreciate it, though. Probably the greatest thing the internet has ever produced. And yet it turns out Hillary Clinton wasn't having the time of her life on that debate stage last year. Her new book, What Happened, is just 3 weeks away from release. You probably pre-ordered it. But we have newly released excerpts. In them, Clinton describes her visceral disgust, her revulsion at sharing a debate stage with Donald Trump.
It was the second presidential debate, and Donald Trump was looming behind me. 2 days before, the world heard him brag about groping women. Now we were on a small stage, and no matter where I walked, he followed me closely, staring at me, making faces. It was incredibly uncomfortable. He was literally breathing down my neck. My skin crawled. It was one of those moments where you wish you could hit pause and ask everyone watching, well, what would you do? Do you stay calm, keep smiling, and carry on as if he weren't repeatedly invading your space? Or do you turn, look him in the eye, and say loudly and clearly, back up, you creep, get away from me?
That's from the audiobook. Imagine listening to that on a long road trip. I don't even think Hillary voters would want to do that. Mark Steyn has written, I think, more books than Hillary. He joins us now. So, Mark, there's this moment in there. I don't think we just played it, but she says this. She said, these are her thoughts as she's on the debate stage with Trump. She says, I know you love to intimidate women, but you can't intimidate me. And yet then she basically goes on to explain how intimidated she is by him. Which is it? Is she the victim or the strong person?
Yeah, that's a when you said that was the audio book, by the way, I've already got that voice in my car. It's the one that tells you to fasten your seatbelt. I don't actually need an extended director's
I don't think I'm allowed to laugh, but I am anyway.
But initially when I heard it, when she's talking about this guy looming behind her, making her feel uncomfortable, invading her space with a reputation for groping women, and she wants to say, back off, you creep, I thought she was recalling her first date with Bill. But apparently not. This is how she feels about Trump. And there is something actually quite amazing, even when we go back to what you've been talking about tonight with the ESPN and all that, that Hillary Clinton is so unself-aware that she writes the central passage of her book is about what it's like to be made to feel uncomfortable by a man with a reputation for groping women. Well, now you know how Paula and Monica and Kathleen and Juanita and all the rest of them feel. It's incredible. This could have been an interesting book, but if it's as phony as this is just going to be, I believe, her third unread memoir.
You got to wonder, though, if there's not an editor who maybe took Psych 101 in college who could say to her, maybe you shouldn't write that. I mean, in here she says, I've had a lifetime of dealing with difficult men. Maybe an editor would say, let's go ahead and take that out. You know what I mean? Because we don't want to add to the psychodrama. I guess no one in her universe can tell her that.
No, and can't tell her that the truth, which is that we'd all actually like to know the truth of the Clinton marriage. She knows some very dark secrets, and that would make an interesting book. But what's interesting here, too, is that if you just think, and we talked about this a few months ago, if you just think of the excuses she has come up with as to why she lost the election, we did a whole segment on her blaming it on Macedonian content farmers, if you recall. And you actually sent a reporter to the Macedonian embassy in Washington.
Of course, someone needed to defend the honor of Macedonia. Yeah.
Exactly, and so this would be the all-time greatest thriller if Hillary traces the secret of her defeat. She actually visits a Macedonian content farm, and there's some gnarled old Macedonian content farmers sitting on the weathered porch of the Macedonian content farm, playing the Godolka as they sing the ancient peasant songs of their people. Macedonian content farmers back through the generations. That would have been an interest. That would have been an interesting book to read, to actually unravel the mystery as to why the most inevitable president in the history of inevitability is now washed up and wandering in the woods talking to herself and saying to Bill, well, you know, that Donald Trump, he really made me feel uncomfortable. And he has this reputation for groping women, Bill. Oh, where are you going? You're just popping in to see that attractive young widow who's moved in next door. That would be an actual Hillary Clinton book worth reading. But you know, Tucker, the thing about Hillary, I read her first memoir cover to cover, and the nonsense in Hillary's account of her life, going back to her very name, when, as you recall, she told Sir Edmund Hillary, conqueror of Everest, that she had been named after him. He conquered Everest in 1953. She was born in 1948 when Sir Edmund was an obscure New Zealand beekeeper.
He was a beekeeper. I remember that.
That's right.
I'm sorry. I can't get past the gnarled Macedonian content farmers. It's too good. Mark, we're out of time. I'm sorry. It was great to see you.
Great to see you, Tucker.